Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the special council meeting to order, that being the meeting of Warwick Township Council, December 12th, 2024, and as always, we start at 3:30 unless otherwise stated. The purpose of the meeting today is the presentation of the proposed 2025 budget for the Township of Warwick. Remind council of disclosure of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. Does anybody have one at this time? Seeing none. I also like to welcome everybody who's joining us through YouTube. And I'm now going to do the acknowledgement of ancestral lands. We acknowledge that the Township of Warwick is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, as well as the many Indigenous nations in Ontario, whose footsteps have marked them for centuries. We also wish to acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 29 and Treaty 25 territories signed by Chippewa chiefs, and offer our respect and gratitude for these lands. Council, I'm going to take us to number 5 on the agenda. Councilors' commitments and items. I know we just had a meeting on Monday of this week. Did anybody have anything that they'd like to change or offer up for council commitments? Seeing none. I'm going to go to councilors' items. Does anybody have anything for councilors' items at this point in time? No? Thank you very much. There are no staff items, Madam Clerk. Thank you. And we have no delegations or timed events today. Now gets us to number 8 on the agenda and the reason we're here today. I'm going to ask Mr. Trevor Jarrett, our treasurer, deputy CEO, to make his presentation on the 2025 budget. Trevor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If we can go to the first presentation on the draft budget. I'm going to quickly go through this. There's basically the same presentation as in past years. We have several graphs that come immediately after this that highlight where we sit in terms of reserves, debt, third-party debt, and reserves versus debt per resident. Slide number 5 comes to the reserves versus debt per resident. I don't know if you can scroll. It shows that the trends are still very good for us. Solid. Our reserves are coming down. That's because of a variety of different factors. We're catching up on a lot of capital projects, and also the cost of capital has gone up higher than what our recent increases in revenues coming in have been. So that is going to be something I'll address later on. Debt servicing is the next. Again, our debt servicing relative to third-party debt, the big change since all the time it's been coming down is the add-on of the ELCC. Once I came on board, it increased. So that happened. The next slide relates county mill rates per municipality or township relative to ours. You will see that 12th, even below the county of Lambton, Warwick still resides. What this means is it's going to come into effect or into impact later in today. A 1% increase in a tax rate for us is not as impactful as a 1% increase in a municipality that's got a higher tax rate. For example, I live in Sarnia. Essentially, a 2% tax increase here equals a 1% tax increase there. So that has to be considered in any numbers presented. Next slide, please. As we know, the MPAC reevaluation of CVA has not increased since 2020. So there's no growth due to changes in current value assessment on properties. Instead, everything's held is pretty much the same. In this presentation, based on last year's mill rates, a 1% tax increase for the municipality will increase $30,000 in new revenue. We also have a situation whereby we have some residential and commercial growth has happened, and that alone, if taken in that the impact of 2024 mill rates adds $51,000. I always start a budget in the same situation that I ended off last year. Last year was a 5% increase. You will see my notes in here, and everything that I'm going to present today is tied to a 5% increase. 5% increase between the growth and 30,000 per percentage increase equals new revenue of $204,000. At this time, We don't know the county and the education rates. We assume they're going to be close to where they are going to be a nominal increase for education. And we expect the county to be similar to where the bulk of the county is going to go. Township work right now is 1% lower than the township and then the county of Lambton, 8.18 lower than the second lowest rate in the county of Lambton. And that is Lambton Shores. And we're 62.08 of the average within the county. So there's a lot of opportunity to increase to grow that way. We're not doing it this time. A 5% tax increase adds $41.79 per household for 100,000 CPA. Next slide. It's a representation of what we spoke about, where Warwick is relative to the second lowest, the median, and the highest. As you can see, the median is roughly 67% higher. The highest is over 100% higher than where we're at. And the next 4 slides do it in a pie chart format. And the numbers are very comparable. The fourth, this slide here, we will get if we went to the second lowest tax rate and they held true and we went to that, it would increase our taxes by $226,000. That's what our revenue would increase by. If we went to the median, it would go $1.74 million. That's what our revenues would grow by. However, based on the current tax rates and the growth, it's going to be 12 years before we get there. That's assuming nobody else grows. And if we got to the highest, it would add an extra $3 million in terms of tax revenue. But we're nowhere close to that. That would take 20 years with the current rate of growth. So our budget increase required to fully fund operations just straight from taxation is $286,000. And that's at 5%. Any percentage you come down or go up would take that number, sway it one way or the other by 30,000 per percentage point, just so everyone understands. Next slide is our 2024 tax rates and what is raised across by each one. Total residence taxes paid to all 3 boards was 7.39%. Our portion was $3,015,000. So more went to the county and less went to education. Simulation is the next slide. It just tells you where the tax dollars come from. 47% of it still comes from residential. The second biggest component is farmland. It's at 31%. Few slides down. And the next one. That's your budget allocation for next year. The largest component of our budget going forward is barely public works. Protection with the increase in OPP costs next year has really brought up the cost factor there. So they're almost interchangeable now. And I actually lied to you. The next slide gives me the percentages. Protection is the largest with the OPP increase. The one good thing is the OPP increase this year is $98,000, but there is a one-time rebate of prior OPP overtime and costs coming back to the municipality of $103,000. So we're actually 5,000 ahead. It's a one-time thing. Next year, I don't think the OPP costs are going to go down. We're going to have to find a way to absorb the additional increase of costs OPP ourselves. So just a heads up, that alone is a 3% tax increase. Next slide relates where the revenues come from: taxation, grants, interest, user fees, host fees, and various different miscellaneous categories. Essentially, we're bringing in per resident $3,115. Our expenditures, based on what is proposed in the budget today, shows that operationally, capital and debt servicing, we're going to be $3,247.48. The delta there that's going to be in place is going to be money that's going to be drawn from reserves or from other sources increased in other revenues that we haven't projected this time. That being grants that we've applied for that haven't come in, but we've applied for them that are tied into here. So end of the day, I'm positive that we will come in with a balanced spend, even though we're proposing a little bit of a deficit in the budget. My next graph I want to go to is 2 slides down. Insurance costs, they continue to increase. In the past 7 years, insurance costs have increased by 120%. This year's increase is 10%, which I hate saying it's reasonable considering what we've been through the last 2 years, considering the 2 floods that have occurred that not only impact us, but they also impact the wider, I guess, catchment area where the funds are collected, where the risks are mitigated from. I know our insurance provider, the day that we called them, had 250,000 claims just for the GTA alone because they had flooding the same time we did. Overall, what's presented today is going to see a shortfall of $286,000. Compared to last year, when we first had this meeting, we were $297,000 higher than that. We were in just a shade below $600,000 we were projecting. Staff scrubbed some softness out of the budget and duplication to come down to where we are today. We've also taken a look at revenues and expenditures of what's changed. There is 72 line categories in the budget binder that have changed from last year to this year. Cumulatively, revenues have grown by $428,000. 205 of that is from taxation. Expenditures have only grown by $416,000. So we're tightening the gap every time. The one thing that is of interest, as I spoke about it earlier, if we had the increase on the CVA through an impact reassessment, just at the growth that would have been prior to that, that funding gap probably would not exist. They've held all municipalities stable for a period of time. There was a reason for it at the time because of the pandemic. They couldn't get into it. I don't expect it to happen anytime, but that's caused a little bit of shrinkage in terms of what our growth could have been just through the growth in terms of residential value. That's the side of it. The next thing to talk about would be capital. If you can bring it up, Heather. There's some interesting information in here. The third slide is the best slide to go to, which talks about funding. Two slides down, please. There. What we're presenting as funds available this year is $3.7 million. The reason why we're having this today and we're going to have a second meeting in January is there's still work being done on bringing in the best capital plan possible. Next week, we have Spreet's making a presentation on what they believe is drainage issues that are going to have to come and be addressed that are going to add to the $6 million plus $6 million request that's currently there. And there is also going to be review by council on the state of certain infrastructure assets that are being identified as being included in here so that informed decisions can be made before we come with a final plan. Where this 3.7 comes from, host fees provide 2.5 million. OCIF formula, it decreased this year by 3%. It's down to 604. Gas tax rose by 1%. It's up by 119. And reserves of 513,000 to cover on the environmental capital projects, water and sewer. Those are what we can do for. I cannot tell you what the capital shortfall will be January, I can tell you what the capital shortfall will be, because by that time we will have reined in exactly what the capital plan will be that fits the targets for council to go forward to achieve what's best for the community at that time. Another request that happened last year is council asked staff to set up certain funds for projects. They include 2 culverts. I have a note, please bear with me. Site 1 Hickory Creek culvert and site 40 Bethesda Road. Half of the funds were allocated last year. Over a 2-year period. Next year, you'll have the second part of that. It'll be in the final draft of it. John Street water main drainage. During the budget meeting last year, there was a presentation and Spreets suggested we'd add an extra $500,000 to upsize that pipe so that it would accommodate more severe storms. That was built in knowing it was a 2-year budget. $500,000 would have to be allocated from the 2024 budget. That's in this and will be in the final budget presentation. And the last thing that is in there that is an ongoing project is we have a SharePoint migration. Right now, we record stuff and save it on servers. This is to move everything to a shared data format, which is going to be on a cloud basis. We have to complete that migration. It's $25,000. It's not a material amount, but we're trying to get there. And these are projects that are commitments for multi-years. In the budget binder this year, there are not very many requests for equipment relative to roads, infrastructure like culverts, and the requests of certain departments. The one thing that are in there is 4 vehicles, I apologize. One for a backhoe, which will be deliberated in January. And we also have 2 vehicles in there that will take multi-years to order. And similar to what we did last year with projects where we started funding over multiple years, we cannot enter into contract without having some sort of funds available. So the request that I'm going to have is council to give direction to Public Works and Parks and Rec to continue working down those pathways for a tandem, which is going to have to be replaced. It's got a 2 to 3 year order period. And the Zamboni or the ice resurfacer, which is, I believe, Olympia, needs to be renewed at this point in time. And I'd like council to, coming out of this today, to allow the Public Works manager, Parks and Rec manager to also work on that. So we have it tight as can be, and it can be funded over a 2-year period. Those are the only requests I have for what I'd like to do today, other than the usual. Every year I ask that council approve, coming out of this meeting, staff, particularly the Public Works manager, and welcome Ryan, you're gonna like, welcome Kyle, you like this one. Opportunity to prepare the RFP for gravel and calcium, which are going to be an ongoing concern. Preliminary costing is we don't anticipate a significant increase from this year, but we won't know until we go to the market. And if we do a tender right now, I can true it up for the final budget presentation. I just want to have that permission for Kyle to go ahead. Other than that, I am open to questions. I welcome any from anyone. If they're specific to a department regarding capital, I may defer to certain department managers, but this is for everyone to digest. Please come back to me with specific questions. That includes the public and members of the public. I'm very open to talk about it, and we will continue to work through it and have the final presentation in January.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Trevor. We appreciate that. Let's take care of that one piece of business right off the bat if we can, when it talks about going out and getting our estimates on gravel, those types of things. We do that traditionally to give our Public Works manager the opportunity to get the best deal possible. Is somebody willing to make the motion to allow the public? Councilor Morris, you're making that motion? Thank you.
Yes, I am.
Do we have a seconder? Councilor Manning? Any further discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Okay, Councilor Morris has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Are we going for 65% fracture this year, or we talked about it last year. I don't know what's out there, but I think we had 65 last year, didn't we?
I know that this has been hard to find. We used to have our standard was a lot higher until the pits ran out of that. I don't want to put Kyle on the spot. I don't know if Kyle's looked at the fracture of the stone yet. I think last year was 65%, if I'm not mistaken. Kyle, I don't want to put you on the spot. Have you thought about the fracture of the stone at all?
I do not have that information for you guys yet. I gotta look into it. Sorry.
Enough. Councilor Morris.
I just don't want to go below 65. I know it might be tough to get, but I think if we go any lower, it's going to be all over the side of the road rather than the center of the road.
So I guess the understanding would be that we would look for at least that standard, if not maybe even a little bit better if it exists. And that's part of the process of bringing it back. But I think you use basically the same process you did last year, Mr. Treasurer. So I think that's what we're looking to do. Did anybody else have any other questions? Councilor Westgate.
Did that include the calcium too? The motion?
Anybody else have any questions? At this time, we will be getting together again on Wednesday, January 22nd at 3:30 to really start the deliberations around the budget. And as the treasurer said, there's still a few pieces that need to be fed into this document at the end of the day. All the general managers will be present. We have our fire chiefs here again today. They'll be here at January 22nd as well for any questions we may have. And as the treasurer said, he is available for any discussion, consultation from anybody in the council or from the public who has any questions on this. And we go from there. Is there anything anybody would like to ask about the budget before we exit? Councilor Westgate?
On the budget we always say we're the lowest in Lambton County. How are we compared to other counties, say Middlesex or north of us? Can you find that out or can you compare that? It's nice to say we're the lowest in Lambton County. It'd be nice to say we're the lowest in southwestern Ontario.
I don't have that granularity through Opta. And I will be working on that because I've got contacts in other municipalities. The only one that I think is actually close to us is the city of Toronto. And they do it through a lot of population rather than taxes and anything like that. It's density that works in their favor. But I've been told unofficially by people who have a wider spectrum of viewing than I do. They can't believe we deliver as much with so little in tax.
So as I usually say, almost every year, we really have a responsibility to raise as much money through taxation as it takes to run the business. And as you can see, when you go through this book, there's a lot of future items that need to be purchased, especially when it comes to our fire service as well. A couple new rescue vehicles and some other equipment that's going to time out here in the next 4 or 5 years. So I would ask council, as you always do, to go back and go through this book with the due diligence needed and come back with your questions on the 22nd. Because in all honesty, it's nice to have the lowest tax rate. There's no doubt about it, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not always a good thing when you need things that the community needs. So you have to plan ahead and make sure we're putting the dollars away. So we're doing that due diligence and being proactive when it comes to the things that we're going to need at the end of the day. Sure, it's great to keep taxes reasonable. I know we all want to do that. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility to make sure that we keep up to date with our equipment. And last year, one of the pieces we did do is we put a little more money into the fire budget at the end of the budget to try to be proactive. But again, it is nice to keep things reasonable for everybody. There's no doubt about it. And we'll try our best, but we do have a responsibility to update the equipment and look at the future as well. So I'll leave it at that unless anybody else has any questions or comments at this time. Councilor Westgate?
There's one other thing. I was at a conservation meeting today and they were talking about maybe more players coming on for insurance. I wondered if we'd heard anything about that. It says there's a chance that maybe insurance will not go up another year like they have been.
Right now, there are 4 players in there that we've seen. There's a couple of out of province insurance providers that are looking to make an entry into the market. When they do, we will definitely reach out to get quotes.
Okay. Anybody else have any other question or comment for today? Everybody's got their homework after today to go back? Yes, Councilor Morris.
I guess just one question, Trevor. Unless I misread it, we're 200 and some odd thousand in deficit for our operating. Is that correct? 285 or 58, I can't remember what it was.
On the proposal, we're gonna be 286.
Okay,
We'll be running. a
I guess
deficit
the
of-
question I had, I went through everything on the operational and a lot of the wages. Like for an example, the Watford Fire Department volunteer, you've got 120,000 down. The actual was 0 and you budgeted another 120,000. Is that affecting the 200 and some odd thousand we're short?
No.
Okay.
The actuals are actuals as of paid on November 26th. So the year end isn't completed yet. The payroll was processed for the fire department on this pay period. So it'll be in an update.
All right. All I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Anybody else have any questions for today? All right. Thank you very much. That's going to end the public portion of our meeting today. I appreciate everybody that came for coming out today. Thank you very much. I'm now going to be looking for a motion from council to go in camera pursuant to the Municipal Act and Section 239 to deal with the matter regarding personnel matters about identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. And number 5, a matter concerning litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Manning, seconded by Deputy Mayor Cowenberg. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.